Counter-Narrative News, bringing you daily news today on Tuesday the 14th of March 2023. In a naval base in San Diego in the USA at Point Loma, the leaders of Australia, Britain and the United States, that's Biden, Albanese and Biden, have announced a new military strategy by means of nuclear submarines to attempt to militarily contain China in the regional waters around the Asia-Pacific region. This is going to be apparently a $368 billion project over the next 3 decades. However, there's a lot of, and to bounce off the term AUKUS, in terms of Australia, UK and US, very much so, and a very awkward approach, because there's a lot of controversies here. First of all, Australia currently does not have the capability to produce nuclear submarines. It has none, and therefore the US and Britain, it's saying, is going to make investments in Australia to be able to even just have the capacity to even to service these nuclear submarines even coming from the US and UK. Also, Australia doesn't have the capacity to get rid of the nuclear level of fuel in terms of dumping it and depositing it. It doesn't have the capacity to do that. And in terms of the regional powers in Asia in which Australia sits in, of course, China correctly sees this as another posture militarily to try and propagandize it against it, and also to treat it in a growing militaristic manner, and in that they're correct. But also Malaysia and Indonesia have also raised protests and concerns over this new initiative. Indonesian President Joko Widodo, for example, has asserted that Australia must fulfill its obligations around the NPT, the Nuclear Weapons Non-Proliferation Treaty, and also it's arguing it must collaborate in total transparency with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and Indonesia has said it will reject any collaboration by use of its territories and waters for this new military posture from the so-called AUKUS countries. Also, the Southeast Asian region has a nuclear weapons-free zone treaty, which this seems to be in violation of. The regional body ASEAN has a declaration of the zone of peace, and all of which just totally pushes against this colonial, arrogant, assertive, militaristic posture by this new initiative. Australian Foreign Ministry is in a very defensive situation because it's been trying to struggle as to how to navigate, on the one hand, US leading it into a course of military confrontation with the People's Republic of China, and on the other hand, trying to have a kind of functional relationship with the Asian region and its neighbors. And this move only causes consternation, and height of antagonisms and tensions. We have to go back, by the way, to Obama's so-called quote-unquote pivot to Asia, which really was the public initiation of the start of basically having strategically put the Middle East into the place it wants it to. Africa, especially after the Arab Sting and the regime changes, particularly in Libya, has got Africa pretty much more or less where Western neo-colonialism wants it. And so really it's focusing on the Asia-Pacific region, and really the eyes on the prize of the colonialist is making sure that China is weaponized in its propaganda and culture war of divide and rule, and distracting populations from its own culpability and responsibility for global crisis. It also is indicative of the most militaristic elements of the Western finance capitalist imperialist ruling classes that only see competition in the global arena, of which Russia and China and the so-called BRICS are definitely competitors, albeit still providing the same global capitalist framework and not shifting away from that, from Western hegemony, but still they are competitors. And so the most militaristic elements of the Western ruling classes will see only the option of containing to eventually demolish these new global emerging competitors. The UK's new military integrated review has also reasserted that China is a major strategic enemy, basically following on from Rishi Sunak's announcement last September in 2022 that the so-called golden era of British-Chinese relations had come to an end, and that the integrated review and Rishi Sunak's representing the far-right Tory regime regime in Britain, has argued that China is some kind of threat to every single British person and a threat to British values. This is just farcical, ridiculous stuff. It's clearly not. What's actually endangering the British population are the racist and capitalist policies of the far-right trajectory of the British state, particularly, and it's jumped to the far right since the Brexit victory of June 24th, 2017. Related to that also, a report has shown from October 2021 to April 2022, in the 6-month period, some 1,500 police officers in Britain were accused of violence against women. And only out of all those 1,500, only 1% were sacked, i.e. lost their jobs. This again shows clearly that the police force, like most police forces in the world, frankly, are an institutional arm of the state which seeks to batten down, literally terrorize, kill, torture, and injure and terrorize vast sections of the population, particularly those most oppressed, like women, black and brown groups, migrants, etc., so-called illegals without documents, and all the rest of it. The British police force are showing themselves to be a veritable gang or clan of the most prolific sexual abuser, who was a police officer, Darren Carrick, and also Wayne Couzens, who used his police identity to kidnap, rape and torture and kill Sarah Everard a few years ago. However, the British population are not rebelling at the police, they're not campaigning, despite these open scandals emerging. To South Africa, the Labour Appeal Court there, the arm of the South African state, has ordered health workers who've been on a strike for over a week to return to work. They have demanded a 10% wage increase, which is still not even in line with inflation. That's still a real terms pay cut. And the government has only offered it 4%. Of course, the health worker trade union has expressed great disappointment and said that this indicates how the ANC South African state is absolutely disinterested in any kind of collective bargaining, and it again indicates that the ANC state actually is an anti-people state, is a right-wing state, that it's ordering health workers to return back without actually giving them proper support in their very minimalist, very extremely modest, some would argue even slightly lacking dignity demands of a 10% hike, that the state can't even resolve its energy scandals and crises or blackouts, which also affect hospitals and clinics, but would rather try to bully those people who serve the most vulnerable back to work. It's just unacceptable. Going to Colombia, President Gustavo Petro has denounced the so-called Gulf Clan death squad, which was a part of the so-called self-defense units, which are none other than extreme, violent, anti-communist, pro-neoliberal capitalist looting of Colombia. They were basically torn apart from their organization in 2006, and they formed the Gulf Clan. The Gulf Clan has been conducting violent protests, which has negatively impacted some 300,000 people in communities in Antioquia and Cordoba, which are regions in the northern part of the Colombian state. The Gulf Clan represent up to 60%. They're responsible, and they run up to 60% of the drugs trade, which is mainly around the development of cocaine and its trade. So this is a right-wing death squad that's basically confronting the president and the state. Gustavo is the first left-wing president of Colombia, so his position is correct in that regards, and it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward with these right-wing death squads who've been in a violent confrontation with the de facto defense of the poorest peasantry in terms of accessing their rights and from their wealth of their labor and their land, which is the National Liberation Army, the ELN, and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, which is FARC. That was Counter Narrative News. Please do continue to support us. Please encourage your friends and contacts to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media, particularly on Twitter, @counter_CNN. And we're really happy to announce that we have another special segment in the series on the anti-war series that we've already done 2 videos around. The next one is coming out tomorrow, which will be in commemoration exactly 20 years since the British and US colonial invasion and destruction and occupation of Iraq, which was on March the 15th, 2003. We wish you a fantastic day.